Here we go. Hello, YouTube. It says we're setting up, but I know that what that means is we are already live.
Okay, already, if we're live, then hello, we won't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just pulling up my my YouTube chat so that I can see all of you and make sure that you can hear us and see us adequately as well. And once I hear people in chat and see people in the YouTube chat, then we will commence. How you doing, YouTube? Type to me. Say hello. Let us know that you can see me and hear me. Hello. Can you see us and hear us, Joanne?
Hello, hello.
Yes, they can hear us. All right, we have technical function.
We have liftoff.
Welcome YouTube, welcome Patreon, welcome anyone else who happens to be so graciously listening in their homes and in their hearts. I am so excited to bring to you a very trusted and respected colleague, Carol Howe. I am so thrilled that she said yes to this opportunity for us to have this discussion today. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. There's nothing more fun than discussing this material. People say, don't you ever get tired of this? It's like, no. It's the most fun thing there is.
We really don't. I love discussing this and, of course, love and way of mastery and so many channelings that I love, but this in particular, and you, from my perspective, I just revere, honor, and respect everything that you bring as having personally known and worked directly as a scribe with Bill Thetford. That is bringing so much tremendous value. And in so many other ways, your book was amazing. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, Bill was an amazing person, and I feel like he's no doubt here. He hangs around a lot of people. A lot of people who have the book say, I feel like Bill is guiding me, or I feel like his presence here. It's like he's a busy guy. He's out there all over the place.
I feel that as a channel all the time, and I keep waiting to ask, should I channel him? But he doesn't answer. He often says, well, should you? I don't know. Do you? Do you want to do that?
He's very much an introvert.
And I'll ask a question.
Beyond the grave, he's an introvert.
It seems that way, that there's not a lot of speaking, but there is a lot of laughing.
Yes, absolutely.
And I feel that I'm picking up on him accurately, but I'm waiting on the appropriate time. Maybe I'll ask you then. Yes. Yeah, we could have some conversations with him for sure. So this came together very quickly, and I had the nudge to have this discussion with Carol Howe as a co-facilitator, and for myself as a channel to work in a clear conduit fashion, awake this time, not trance, and to ask him your questions about some of the things that you're struggling with A Course in Miracles, and in your life and in application as students of this course. And anything that's really coming into your hearts right now in your path with ACIM. And what a better master teacher to bring than Carol Howe. So I am incredibly honored to be with her yet again for this. And the way that I thought we were going to go about this when she and I discussed this the first time and the second time and even 5 minutes ago was that we would go through your questions one by one. Yeshua would very directly answer them through me. And then Carol and I would discuss briefly, and we would do this and create this program. And then he said, pick up your pen. And I'm sitting here and he just scribbled like 20 things. And I said, what is that? And he said, these are beliefs that are opportunities for deeper awareness and deeper perspective, to observe beliefs and to become aware of beliefs that you're struggling with, that are opportunities for growth in the human conscious collective. So these are the top 20 beliefs that are currently really causing struggle in what you call, students of the course call this atonement. Some people in New Age communities call this ascension. I like to call it quickening or realization, but we can talk about it and around it, but it is the same thing. And if you're struggling in your path in this way, it's likely one of these beliefs that would be, the block, if you will. I call this the opportunity. The first belief that he wanted to discuss is scarcity and lack. That is the first thing that's coming up as a challenge in the Human Conscious Collective. Anything you want to ask about that, go right ahead. I'm listening for a moment. He said the belief in lack is detrimental in the tool of the body becoming active and helpful, even at the cellular level. So this can become a physiological problem that goes into other beliefs that he mentioned, such as physical illness and death. So the belief in scarcity is something that we need to observe more clearly. That is why. What's your take on scarcity, Carol?
Well, absolutely. I run into that all the time. In other words, it doesn't matter what there is a lack of. There will always appear to be a lack of something. And it's usually the big three: finances, relationships, career, that sort of thing, health. And the sense of lack is always going to be related to the feeling that we are lacking. In other words, this goes back to some of our very, very, very oldest core wounds, some of which at the worldly level, we inherit. Again, you know how the Course speaks to us both as if we're a human being, like living here, having to raise our kids and earn a living and so on. And then it will speak to us to the truth of us. So this is speaking to us as we think we are a person, where we begin with this deep sense that we are lacking ourselves and the feeling of guilt that surrounds that. And out of that's the taproot, so to speak, and the lack and everything else grows out of that. The apparent lack. It's not a real lack, but from our experience, it appears to be a real lack.
It's so convincing to listen to the body mind in this way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
he goes very convincing is what he just said.
and when there is that sense of a problem anywhere, of course, what has happened is, again, at the worldly level, our stress response has turned on, emotions have been created through the body chemistry. And this may be premature, but it needs to be said like every 5 minutes. We have made our emotions the enemy, and they're really a messenger trying to tell us you believe something about yourself that's not true, which is causing you to be frightened, turning on the stress response to try to save you, et cetera, et cetera. And if you push against your own emotional nature, now you're in a closed loop you can't get out of until you start to change your mind.
He just spoke to you and said allowance is the technology for this.
Absolutely. Allowance. And I would like to expand, because we use the words we have to allow and accept, but that carries a sense of resignation with it. Like, I fought against this as hard as I can, and I can't make it go away. And so now I'll just have to accept it. In other words, I hear a lot of people speak of resignation. It's really a welcoming. It's like learning to be glad that this is here, because if I follow through with the message that emotions are giving me, I'm going to be so much better off. So this isn't just, okay, I'll accept it. This is, hooray, it's here. Now, admittedly, nobody does that in the beginning. This is a learned thing, to learn that this is one of the most valuable and helpful experiences we will ever have. And on the other side of it, we will be better, stronger, bigger. The comfort zone will spread out.
It will.
That may have been more of an answer than you want, but that's such a key area, that how acceptance and allowance need to be seen for what those words really mean, and not have resignation sort of layered on top of them.
Resignation meaning grief or
just give up. Yeah, it's like, I hate this still, but I can't do anything about it. So, okay, I'll accept it.
Which promotes a deeper fear and powerlessness.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Anything you resist, as we know, persists.
Yeah. Someone had a follow-up question to him and to you about how, when we're in that space, to trust ourselves more. And he said that forgiveness requires vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And to
And
see something innocently is what he's also saying now. What's your take on that?
well, and of course, that brings up one of the most important things that we could ever discuss. We may just wander all over the place, and that is forgiveness is key. And forgiveness is mostly completely misunderstood. So, this is a problem if I say forgiveness is the key, not one of the keys, and you can choose it. It's the key. And if we misunderstand the key, you can see the problem humankind has in front of it.
Yeah. An attendee just said that acceptance and surrendering is incredibly difficult in ordinary time and space for her. And she's asking him a little bit about, what is the key for that? And there isn't, with the exception of what he's saying is be in the present.
Perfect.
That means you don't need to know. You don't need to trust. You don't need a blueprint for this.
Precisely.
Being in the moment, and the breath will be the guidance into the communication link of Holy Spirit, is what he says. And you as a master teacher will know what he's talking about.
I do, because it's kind of like the transformational process that is built into us. Since we have to use language, that's the best we can do. The transformational process that's built into us requires that we bring our distress to the transformational process. In other words, when I'm busy pushing away, I'm not bringing the things together. It would be like an example I've used forever, but it speaks to me, is if you go camping in the mountains, which I used to do when I lived in Colorado, and you built yourself a lovely big campfire, and you're sitting around the campfire and you go, why isn't my food cooking? Because that's a kind of transformation. If you've got your food still in the cooler in the back of your car, the transformational agent, the fire, can't transform what's not there. You've got to bring your food to the fire. We have to bring what needs to be transformed to the transformational agency, which is right here, right now, in this present moment, where I am and who I am.
Such alchemy in those words. I love it. Going back to the concept of lack, another attendee had a statement rather than the question, and he wanted us to ask Yeshua, what about lack of realization? And he wanted me to bring that question up. He says, you cannot lack what you already are.
Exactly. See, nothing is lacking, no love, no blessing, no, all of the string of adjectives, including, you might say, awareness. It's not lacking, but it is blocked. It would be like I have a window right over here, and I have a real pretty yard out there. And if I have the blinds completely closed and I go, why can't I have a nice yard with flowers and bushes and trees and so on? How am I going to go get them? That's the wrong question. It's like, the question is not how do I make those beautiful things be there? It's what do I have to do to open the blinds so that I can see that they're there? That's why the beginning of the introduction said this is about removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence and all of the great things that stem from that, which are right here in front of my nose, but I can't see them because I've effectively got like a sack over my head. And it's caused by all of those beliefs about ourselves, which are not true, and causes us to stay afraid.
Yeah.
But they're right here. We don't go get them. We allow them to be revealed as we keep letting go of grievances, which is what forgiveness is all about. Not about the other person at all.
Right. It's just about the awareness of the consciousness that's going on, that we are just the body mind consciousness and what it is doing, not an awareness that you are it, because you are not. But he says the awareness of how you're expressing through a body mind consciousness. So body mind consciousness is a tool through which you creatively expand, but it is not you.
Absolutely, it's not you. And the way you can kind of tell this in a way is if I make a statement that says, I'm going to go take a walk. And I know what I'm talking about. That I is talking about, the body mind is going to put on the walking shoes and walk out the door and walk. Or I could say, I'm noticing that I'm walking further than I ever have. And you go, wait, there are two eyes there. What is the eye that's noticing what this eye is doing? Mm-hmm. That's the conscious awareness that we always are, that never goes away. It's not altered or modified in any way. And it's aware of what, shall we say, the small I or the ego mind is up to. But it's very interesting to see as we go through our day, we're alternating between using one word and we're referring to two entirely different things, either that eternal, infinite, conscious awareness that we always are, forever, all the time, and the sense of separate self.
Okay. And he does mention that in two various ways on this list. For those of you who are wondering what I'm doing, he threw us a big long list about 5 minutes before. If you're just joining YouTube, we thought we had our format being very flexible. And now we have this big list of powerful things that he wants to talk about. So within that list, separation. And then he did mention big I and little I, like right beside it, there's a big I and a little I. So
well, that's good. We're reading off the same page.
Yeah, we are. So I am, he said, and is right now saying, what follows the I am? When you say, I see, I know, I feel, I shall, I can. But notice he's not saying, I shall not, I should not, I would or could not. I will not. He says that this universe does not hear the word not. Right. And this is not a religion or a concept. It is a technology, he says. So that's interesting. What's your take on how to be aware of when we're separating that, Carol?
You mean, in other words, when we are drawn into the sense of separate self?
Yeah, when we're doing this thing, going into mind body as if it is the I am versus the God mind, of the
well, one of the things that is the significant identifying difference is that the true presence of us, the I am presence, has peace and a kind of joy that can't be described. It's got, shall we say, all the good stuff that everybody wants to experience is built into the fabric of the I amness of us. So if we're feeling miserable, or we're feeling selfish, or we're feeling lonely, or we're feeling something else, we're identifying with the ego mind small self, because the I amness of us that's not what's built into the I amness of us. Those experiences of distress, whatever we may call them, are the absence, now listen to the sentence structure carefully, to the absence of our awareness of what's there. It's not the absence of it in entirety, it's the absence of our awareness of it. And that leads to the sense of scarcity and lack and loneliness and hatred and everything else. So if you're not experiencing peace of mind, there's a quote in the course, and this is not the exact quote, but it's something that I find helpful when people are going, like, what do I do? I can't understand this. I don't know what it says, and so on. It says, peace and joy and understanding are like a package deal. Obviously, it's poetic. It's not like that, but it's a package deal. But this is basically a quote that says, so if you're not experiencing peace, presume you understand nothing, which is kind of a like, oh, well, if I'm not experiencing peace, and then I must therefore conclude that I understand nothing, that helps to open up. Well, if I don't understand anything, then that possibly tells me I should start to be a little more receptive to some other thought process, some other way of looking at things, some other way of addressing other people and situations. I love that test. If you're not experiencing peace, presume that you're barking up the wrong tree as far as what you think is true and real and how life works. It doesn't say you're bad. It just says you don't understand.
What he's saying right now is that he has given a very clear directive in A Course in Miracles regarding this.
Absolutely.
It is such a clear and simple directive that any of us can follow it if we stop trying to know something from the surface level. Because he said we had it backwards, and he did like this, and he said, flip it around. So yeah. He wants you to take it and flip it around because you have understanding, and you think that if you have understanding, that you will be peaceful. And you think that if you will be peaceful, that you will be happy.
And that you'll get your way.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
The ego will definitely get its way. And that is something that's necessary for any of those three things to occur. And that isn't true. Therefore, he says he needs you to turn that around a bit and understand that, let me say it how he's saying it. He says, peace is that which you already are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's masked by the focus of our attention on the it's all about me thing, which takes up all the airspace, so to speak. So it's why it says the goal of the course is peace of mind. That's not the final step, but until your mind is at peace and you feel safe, and at the worldly level, the stress response is turned off, you can't take the next step, so to speak.
Right.
And that's why, absolutely, if you're not at peace, and the presume that you don't understand anything doesn't mean you're a stupid person.
Right.
What it's referring to is all of the programming. Again, we're now speaking to us as human beings and where we think we are and what we think we are. Because if we don't address that, nobody can pay attention to anything. So it's like the problem is because so much of our programming began both prenatally, that we inherited some at our own conception. And then we were parented by parents who may have wanted the very best for us, but had no idea about early childhood development. They didn't know how to help children regulate their emotions. They just punished them for having them instead, or something like that. We end up, by the time we're 2 years old, and then that's reinforced in those earlier years, so that I've found there's not a one of us here, at least nobody that I've ever run into in the Course in Miracles universe, that by the time we're 6 or 7 has not deeply incorporated this idea that we are unlovable, that we're not okay, that we're flawed in some way, we're undeserving, we don't measure up. There's surprisingly few words that I hear people use over and over and over again. So when that belief is carried forward, it's like, so what the Course does, it comes along as what I think of it is, because we are technologically competent these days, I think of it as a spiritual technology. Yes. Its purpose is to reprogram us, so to speak, because basically we've got a world full of people who are being driven by 2-year-old brains. Yes. In other words, we're still believing the things and we're defending in the same way as we did then, because after all, when things are painful early on, you immediately learn to defend And that gets anchored into not only the physicality of us, but into our, you know, our intellectual defenses, our emotional defenses. So by the time we get to be 23 or 24 years old, when the frontal lobe of the brain is finally developed, it's the last organ of the brain to like fully come online. Nobody ever says, gee, I wonder if everything I ever learned about myself is true or false. It's like, there's no way that we ever ask that question. We presume that what we believe about ourselves aren't beliefs. We think they're the truth. And therein lies our great pain.
He said therein lies the biggest error.
Therein lies the biggest error. And therefore, since the centerpiece of this work is letting go of grievances, you can equate that to letting go of all the things I believe about myself that aren't true, because those things that I believe about myself that aren't true are going to be mirrored in the people who make up my personal universe. And so forgiveness, which we always thought was about somebody else, isn't. It's about steadily letting go of this programming that's causing that sense of lack and scarcity and pain and et cetera, et cetera. The belief
this is why the course exists. And he said this is why many courses now exist for this. And he is giving a clear directive for seekers of the kingdom.
Yeah, the kingdom is you. And the way that you seek it is by letting go of the interference to it.
Yes,
but it's
absolutely.
not over there someplace.
So many people keep saying, yeah, over there, right? How do we do this? How? Give me a blueprint. So he's going to give you a blueprint. He said it is about seeing everything in innocence. Yes. Seeing everything in innocence, which means everything that you see must be love. It must be in and of love. So if you see and observe everything in innocence, then you understand that there's no place, as he's saying now, for fear or illusion, because that would be a false kingdom. That's not the kingdom in here. And it's going back to someone said, how do I have that peace? That is your directive. See, everything is innocent. Everything is guiltless. Therefore, attack is not, has no place in this.
Exactly. And that is not an intellectual process. This is where people make themselves crazy. It's like, I'm looking at this person that burned my house down, and I'm supposed to look at, in other words, we keep thinking of the transgressions as actually happening and someone else is responsible for it. And so you see, the seeing innocence, most people translate is, do you mean to tell me I'm supposed to look at this person who did this terrible thing and, you know, bombed this country or, you know, did whatever they did, and I'm supposed to see they're innocent? In other words, if you try to do that at an intellectual level, there's no way in the world you can do that. So that's why it's a process to realize and come to the place. In fact, I've written up a process that I'm about to put on my website that's called The Process to Peace.
Wonderful.
Because it's not intellectual. And that's why people kind of squint their eyes and it's like, okay, they're innocent, they're innocent, they're innocent. And you no more believe it. And you can't believe it because you have not processed the upset and the fear and the fury and everything else that's going on within you, which is not an intellectual process. It's that's where the acceptance and the allowing and the welcoming has to happen first. And once that happens, then you can get on the process of seeing, like, what is it in me that I'm projecting onto them, and in kind of going through that process. And it works all the time. I'm happy to say I've never seen it not work.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that. And he's commenting on that as well. And he said, there is a reason why I have asked you to observe everyone as little children. Because if a little child did the same to you, would you be projecting guilt onto a little child. So he's not answering, but he did put a question back to you to perceive innocence. Anyone who wishes to go deeper in that.
So are you asking me a question about that? Or are you making that a statement?
He's more of asking, he works in a way where he will ask a question or offer inquiry that a person can ask themselves. So if we are perceiving someone as, this is what I hear quite often, they're an adult, they know exactly that they should know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just going deeper into the perception of attack.
Yes.
So if we are going to truly perceive innocence, one thing that we could do, according to him, is to perceive the inner child's nature and understand the innocence and the way that another being is choosing to create and learn.
There's a process that I have people do sometimes, and it's very effective. Once you can realize that it's time to let go of what you think happened a long time ago because the past is over with, but recognize that you can kind of say to yourself, you as the adult can speak to the child within you. In other words, it's like you can pick up the 3-year-old version of you and the hurt they experienced that you're still experiencing because that belief has come along with you, like moment by moment, by moment, by moment, and by like acknowledging whatever that pain is and comforting. It's like literally you can imagine picking up the 3-year-old version of you, putting that little head on your shoulders, rubbing that little back. It's like, I hear you. I know how frightening this is, how upsetting it is, how awful it might have been, but I'm here for you now, so that you're beginning to bring back that sense of experiencing the innocence of yourself. And when you don't do it, it wrecks everything. It certainly can wreck your health. There was a lady, most of my clients I never meet in person because they're kind of from all over the world, and we either do it on the phone or Skype or something like that. And she was having some very, very serious health challenges, and they would come and go. And I mean, the things that are up here in the really bad things. And so at some point she was saying what was going on. And I said, what you need to do right this very minute is to be very kind and very gentle with yourself. And she said, I don't think I have the right to be kind to myself. And I said, that one statement tells you every reason for why your body is a wreck. That tells you everything. That one sentence that says, I don't deserve to be kind to myself. That one sentence tells you this whole rat's nest of programming. And the problem with our programming is it's mostly unconscious. We don't realize many of the things that we're believing about ourselves until something comes along and triggers that pain and kind of brings it up into conscious awareness. That's why relationships are for healing. That's why of all the teachings of non-duality, this one focuses on healing through relationships in a way that, so far as I know, none of the rest of them do. It's because our relationships are going to kind of reach into our own unconscious and pull up and hang before our very eyes, so to speak. This is what you're blaming yourself for. This is what you're afraid of about yourself. This is what needs to be healed. And so our great challenge, and it's beautifully laid out over and over and over and over again in the course, is we need to reframe what's happening here. These people aren't doing something to us. They are triggering a wound of guilt that we're the very same way that has been going on before we even met that person. So that person is collaborating in bringing what we believe about ourselves that's causing havoc in our lives into our conscious awareness, so that we can be very clear about what we need to heal, what we need to let go of, what we need to realize. Yes, I did a batch of stuff, but it was a mistake and not a crime. It calls for correction and not punishment. It's
His
amazing.
comment on that is understanding the 5 levels of the mind and from which you are operating. Are you operating from perception? Are you operating from thought? Are you operating from emotion? Are you operating from belief? Are you operating from I am? What are you operating from when it is when all of this is going on? Just the level of conscious awareness. And one of these beliefs that he wrote down, called the belief in space and time, that seems to be a foundation that he wants to talk about now as underlying a lot of what you're talking about. So, insofar as the belief in space and time, the belief that there can be, and I've never heard him say this before, that there can be space between you and I, that there can be space between the Father and the Son, that there can be separation at all. So he's using space not in terms of just the cosmos. He's wanting to use it in a different way this time as he comes through me. So space also meaning this cosmic understanding of what you think you are. You cannot possibly comprehend the peace that passeth all understanding. You cannot comprehend the what before accepting the joy and love and peace of the who.
Yeah, whether you call it a who or a what, in other words, but of the truth with a capital T. In other words, that's where the good stuff resides, so to speak. Again, we have to use language, which is very limiting, but it's like, and this is not something that is you can compromise with. It's not like you can go, well, can't I have my way and make people do what I want to do and have some peace and joy? Like, no. In other words, because engagement in how am I going to promote myself better, so to speak, so I can be safe, make up the blocks to the awareness of just what you're looking for. In other words, it's like you're becoming more blind rather than less blind. And this is becoming, this particularly the workbook is about refocusing our attention. In other words, it's not about learning anything, which is, and people get into the course thinking, oh my God, look at this great big book. I've got to learn all this. No, this is an unlearning process, not a learning more stuff that you have to carry around with you. And if one can see it this way, the lessons in the course are giving you a jewel that says, if today you will focus on this, you're going to be steadily reprogramming yourself, whether you realize it or not. In other words, you're going to be steadily letting go of what's false and incorporating more and more awareness of the truth that's already here. But it can't happen unless we refocus our attention.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what it's for. That's why I think of it as a brilliant reprogramming device, because if you look at it strictly from the time and space level, our neuroscientists will tell us that if you focus contemplate an idea for like something as short as 20 seconds, already new synapses begin to grow in the brain. In other words, you're starting to create new channels, which sooner or later, a new way of thinking of yourself becomes the new default way instead of the old, unfortunate, I'm no good default way that's been going on before. And if you don't do that, it's like you can't reprogram if you don't, it's like playing the piano. You have to practice. This is a practice that's called of us. And it's interesting that it doesn't ask us really, as particularly in the beginning, to meditate, where the mind is getting quiet. It also is not asking you to analyze and learn and do intellectual things. It wants us to contemplate, which is kind of the place in the middle, because the contemplation is that focused awareness on, I really am as God created me. In other words, that's one of the lessons. It's like, I really am love right now. I really, that right now in this moment, this is what I actually am. And so it's like, it's not a figuring out and it's not a rote repetition. It's like giving this idea your full undivided attention, because full undivided attention is key. Does that make sense?
It does. And the ego, he said the ego would choose to come forth and say, but what about tomorrow? And what about what I haven't forgiven yesterday?
Exactly.
None of which is relevant, because there are no spaces between you and I. There are no spaces between God and Son until you believe in separation.
Absolutely.
And there are these 20 steps to unprogram the insane mind. And now he wants me to list the list that he gave me.
Okay.
So space and time, scarcity, deprivation, that error or sin can hurt you, death, birth, physical illness, the belief that miracles are scary, differences, the belief that darkness can hide, the belief in the complex of superiority and inferiority, the belief in physical sight, the belief that the body can be used as a means of atonement, realization, or ascension. Now that was an interesting one. I think we already covered the belief in separation and the belief that you are a body, the belief in selectivity, the belief in attack, the belief in rejection or abandonment, and finally, he saved the best for last, the belief that God forced Adam out of the Garden of Eden, and then therefore we are all sinners.
Well, that's just baloney. And it's like in the very beginning where it says, you know, the sole responsibility of the miracle worker, which would be anybody who wants to change their minds, is to accept the atonement for himself. Atonement doesn't mean sacrifice. It doesn't mean any of that. So it says finally to begin to acknowledge you've never left home. In other words, oneness is still one. And it's like you do that and everything is handled. Now, doing that is a process and not an event, but it mentions it, you know, very early on, like this is where we're headed, everybody. And the realization comes upon us slowly, partly because the ego mind is terrified of this course.
True.
I mean, to the ego mind, the idea of unity and joining, and I'm going to just get lost in the cosmic soup, no thanks. I'll take the pain of being separate before I want to jump into the annihilation of being one. See, that's what the ego mind promotes. It's like, obviously that is not true. The actual fact is, the more you go, we will call it toward unity, toward that experience of oneness, the more you feel. And you go, well, who can wrap their head around that? Well, it's the problem of language, but it's my experience. And having had some of these experiences, that the more you claim and go for, so to speak, and head in the direction of, more than anything else, I want to experience the unified nature of everything, the more distinctly you become. It's not that you become, we think to become distinctly me, I have to be super separate. And it is absolutely just the opposite. The more I find my, again, language is such a problem, but the more I find my place in the whole and experience the wholeness, the more uniquely I feel myself to be at an experiential level.
Hmm.
But until you've had that experience, it's like, no thanks. I would rather just do the best I can being a body personality and trying to make it work out than I would rather be annihilated. Well, if those are your choices, those are two really bad choices to choose between. But usually limping along as a person in a compromised way seems better than annihilation. But don't underestimate the fear and the terror. I had an experience of terror early on, about 3 months into the course. And I was sure that I would not survive the night. It just came out of nowhere. And of course, months later, I get to lesson 195 or 6, whichever one it is, that says, the time will come when terror grips your mind so wholly that escape appears quite hopeless. It feels like there is a murder within you, intent upon your death, blah, blah, blah. And I'm spellbound as I read this lesson, which totally describes the experience I had 6 months earlier. And it's like there is that level of terror that is like buried down there someplace that is now in the process of, shall we say, being exposed so that the healing can occur. And for most people are not going to get a big dose of terror all at once. In other words, it's going to be issue after issue and person and after situation and so on is going to continue to bring up ultimately our most basic programming so that we can face it. You see, back when we were very, very small, and we felt like we were punished or abandoned or put in our rooms or humiliated or something when we didn't do whatever the family directive was. Maybe you said no, and that family doesn't allow little children to say no. And so what seemed like a very difficult punishment took place. So then you grow up and you become an adult, and all of that programming that's built in at the most survival level of a human being is still alive and well. So now I get to be an adult and I don't dare say no to anybody, even like, would you like to buy a newspaper? Oh, it's slow. I guess I have to buy a newspaper. In other words, it's like we're crippled in an emotional way with this programming that we don't even know is there. Driving the bus, who knew? And A Course in Miracles, as far as I'm concerned, because I had done many things before it came along in my life, is just the best there is in kind of driving everything up to the surface so it can be addressed from, you might say, an adult point of view, so that I'm not still driven by, I must do this and I can't do that, which is what drives the majority of people on the planet. And this is not a crime, but it's how it is.
Right. I observe it as well. And that brings me to an interesting question, because that is another form of separation. And another viewer brings him the question of separation. And he said, it's more of a statement that he doesn't really relate to choosing to separate. Just like the concept of original sin, that he doesn't personally experientially connect with it. And he asked Yeshua, am I supposed to? And the answer to that is really interesting. He said, in each moment when you are allowing innocence, forgiveness is relevant, and the observation of desire becomes apparent. You do not have to literally save yourselves. But when you believe in separation, if you did, you would have saved yourself countless lifetimes of suffering. And I mean that quite literally. So, no, you don't have to separate. He said, remember that if my sons and daughters choose to sleep, if they choose to dream, I will not stand in their way to do so. So he's also, and not my take on that answer is, okay, you're dreaming. We understanding that you're choosing to dream that you are separate, that you're choosing to dream in original sin. However, you have permission to dream however you want to dream. You are the sons and daughters of God. So,
well, because the Course, it says there is no higher power than you that could kind of reach down in your mind and say, let me remove this unfortunate programming for you and wake you up and so on. It's like, that's why we have to be persuaded to operate in our own best interest, because there is no power higher than we are. You go, what? I thought God was higher than I am. It's like, God is what you are. So how can there be anything higher than that? So even in those ways where we have to undo so much that's cultural, it's not just specific to our families, it's cultural, that idea that there's something bigger, stronger, better, whatever than I am. Well, that's a major belief that has to be undone. And you don't just do that with the snap of a fingers. You do that by living through your life on a daily basis in a more open and a more trusting, that trust your presence, trust your intuition. It knows where it's taking you. In other words, that's why this is a process and not an event. And it's kind of like doing an archaeological dig. You deal with these things on the top, and then more is revealed and more is revealed and more is revealed. But life keeps getting better and better and better. And every time you deal with these issues and you handle them not defensively, but openly, it's like your comfort zone keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, until pretty soon you think, I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything. I can go anywhere on the planet. I can do whatever it is I need to do. I don't have to defend myself from anything. And I'll tell you what, living that way is just more fun than anything. The idea that everything I encounter, I now choose to see as a friend, as a colleague, as an ally, as we're in this together. It's just a beautiful way to live, even when we appear to be separate bodies. But we can relate to one another more and more and more, as if we have so much in common. And so that's why this is a gradual process. Do you have time for me to tell you a fast story about that?
Yes.
That just happened. So I was walking the other day. In fact, I just recorded a little blog thing about it, but I'll make this very short. So I'm out walking, and I have many routes that I could take, but I just was sort of led down this particular way. And there were a couple of workmen doing something to a utility pole. And I'm always friendly with everybody. Some people, when they walk, they look straight ahead as if they wouldn't dare talk to anybody that they might encounter. But I always talk to everybody. And so the two guys, and so the younger of the one said, when I said hello to him, and he said, oh, come here and look at this. And it's like, okay. So I took 2 or 3 steps over, and it's like, what? And he said, look at that. So I look and I said, what? And he said, I just killed that snake. And it's like, well, it's sort of an unremarkable snake for Florida. After all, this is where snakes and alligators and whatnot live. Yeah. So in any event, I said, well, guess what? So here, now we've become pals, this young man and I, because in the moment, and I don't do this, I don't have to think about it ahead of time. My goal is always that I want whoever's in front of me to feel safe and to feel, speaking of innocent, to know that as far as I'm concerned, they must be innocent, because I don't in any way think they can harm me. You see, that's what innocence is the realization you can do no harm. So if in the moment you're treating somebody like, I'm delighted to be here with you because you're harmless. Do you see what I'm saying? So in any event, I said, oh, last week a snake got into my house. A guy was doing some work on my screen-in porch and left the door open. And I looked down and I thought, that is a really kind of a fat, what cable do I have that's that big around? And all of a sudden the cable slithered under the sofa. And it's like, ugh. So nevertheless, I told him this little story and left and presumed I would never see him again. Yesterday, I had to go run some errands, drove home. And as I pulled into my driveway, it's like, now somebody's doing something with my utility pole over here. And I thought, this is odd. It's the same. They wear the same yellow hard hats and the same little vest or something. So I pulled in and said, what are you guys doing here? And he said, we're fixing all the utility poles to make them more hurricane proof. They're hardening them in some way. Okay. So one of these guys that I'm sort of just being pleasant with, but just like, what are you doing? Okay, fine with me. And I started to walk in the house. So one of them says, your yard is gorgeous. Well, I love to play in my yard. That's my hobby. So he said, it's the most beautiful yard. And I said, thank you, thank you. And I went in, and then I thought, I just saw you the other day. Aren't you the guy that I talked to and you just killed the snake in the road? And he said, yes, that was me. I thought I recognized, and this is like a half a mile away. You know, this is not like next door. So he said, and I love your yard. I said, well, would you like to come into my backyard? I'll show you my backyard. And he said, yes. So we get into my backyard. It turns out he was a 29-year-old. He told me his life story in 2 minutes. A 29-year-old young African-American man. And he looked at me and he said, earnestly, what do I have to do to live the way you live? He said, I work very hard. I said, well, I'm glad you work very hard, but this is not about working hard. This is about loving yourself. This is about, in other words, gave him my little 10-minute elevator speech. You know, this is what you have to believe about you. And what do you do with your 3 little girls and so on. And this smile is getting like this big at this point. And he left and he said, thank you, thank you, thank you. I will remember you all my life. And there's something that's just blessed about these little tiny encounters. I'm sure I'll never see him again, but notice when you ask for help, this young man had obviously in his own mind been trying to figure out how life works in some way. And we're told anytime you ask for help, you have to get it. Well, look what we'll just call it the universe, had to arrange that I had to walk down that street, see this guy, run errands. They had to be at my house when I came back. He had to ask, in other words, all of these little things led to. And when he asked me, I said, well, I'm glad you asked because I happen to know the answer to your question. And he was just thrilled. But it was as delightful for me as it obviously was for him. There's nothing lovelier than interacting with people in such a way that I can look at this young 20-year-old man, 29-year-old man in the eyes. And at that moment, he becomes the focus and the love of my life. In other words, nothing at that moment, because this moment is all there is. And if in this moment, I am completely devoted to his welfare, his wife's welfare. I said, here's what you need to do with those 3 little girls. It's like they need to learn to regulate their emotions. Don't punish them when they're upset. And gave him some ideas and so on what to do. And it was like his mouth was falling open. That kind of what he had run into. But the key is, as we become safer, as we do these practices ourselves, and then we want that for the other people. That's part of that when he said, see the innocence in everybody. This is an example of just deciding, I'm going to treat this person as if they're harmless. They can do no harm. I don't need to be defensive. You know, the 2 longest lessons in the course that are like into the 4th page instead of the 1, 2, or 3 pages long are the ones about, in my defenselessness, my safety lies. And if I defend myself, I am attack. In other words, it's like dropping those defenses, which asks us, it feels like we're being asked to volunteer to be burned at the stake, because to drop the defenses means we're defying that earliest programming that got us so scared and guilt-ridden and punished when we were so little. So we're going down to the most basic place. And that's why intellectually you could go, oh yes, I can do whatever it might be, but you start to do it and you realize that you are defying that earliest programming that's wired in at a survival level, where the wiring says, never do this ever. And yet this is the kind of thing that the Course undoes for us, and we can be free. We are in a little tiny prison when we are bound by these prohibitions, many of which we don't even know are there. Think of that.
He's making a comment about freedom right now, and how freedom relates to what you're saying. And he said it's unlike anything that you will ever taste, see, hear. And if you would know the sweet nature of perfect divine freedom, then it would be easy to commit to replacing these erroneous perceptions.
Absolutely.
That you've made and that you've thought, and all these perceptions that you've held of everyone and everything that makes you believe that you can't forgive, that you would be terrorized to forgive.
Yes.
And his directive on that is to be still. He said the breath is the technology to the peace that passeth understanding. And the breath is the window to the stillness of this freedom. Be still and know that I am real, and that you are my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased.
Yes.
You're such...
and even at the time and space level, what we learn to do very early on related to breathing is you can see this in babies and little kids. When you're hurt, either physically or emotionally hurt, people will go, hold the breath, hold the breath, because that cuts off pain. It cuts off both emotional and physical pain. So we're habituated. Again, that's one of the major physical defenses that's built in, is not being able to breathe. Most people, unless you've done a lot of body work, I've actually done a lot of like deep tissue body work kind of stuff. Unless that's happened, you couldn't take a deep breath if you wanted to, because the cartilage between the ribs is so atrophied from not taking a deep breath that it's now kind of like cast in concrete, so to speak. And so, but anytime you breathe deeply, you turn off the stress response. In other words, it greatly aids. So anytime you're in a twit about something, remembering to breathe is a bigger deal than we've ever realized.
Absolutely.
It is.
Well, speaking of awareness, I am noticing that the body requires a temporary restroom break. So to bring that into some awareness, I am going to just kind of mute myself for a bit, for about 5 minutes.
Okay.
And Carol, you're welcome to take a break as well. It won't even be 5 minutes, probably 2, just to grab some water as well for channeling.
Okay, I'll do the same thing. I'll grab a little water and be right back.
I'm going to mute us and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
Am I still here?
We're still here. Yeah.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Mhm.
um, um, I wanted to bring about for his discussion and for yours as well as a master teacher of this course. The topic of desire was coming up from one of my students, for both of you. And he said, if I seek nothing but my blocks, resistance, and misperceptions, how do I hold desire? Is not healing about all intentional creativity and creation? Is not healing all about observing creations and choosing again and creating differently? Is not growth all about owning my freedom and liberating my heart's desire? um, I found that one a little bit wordy, so I'm just
That's a
going to
whole
let
lot of
him.
stuff. You have to, first of all, know what somebody means by the word desire. So it'll be
That's
interesting.
exactly what he said. He said, is your mind perceiving at the level of thought, your definition of desire? Are you operating in language semantics? He said, are you creatively desiring for the purpose of undoing insanity? Because in this holy space of creation, the sun is experiencing much peace, much happiness, much understanding. But there is no truth to blocks, resistance, or misperception in the true realm of holy desire. So that he's kind of, and when he says that, I saw a big D on desire, like a capital D. And then the previous mentioning of desire was lowercase d. What's your take on what he's saying there, Carol?
Um, when the course says this course is about removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence and makes that such a central part that it's one of the 3 or 4 sentences in the introduction, then I pay a lot of attention to that. And in my own experience, I find that we look for how we're interfering with ourselves so we can stop. In other words, this is not, we have made the blocks real. In other words, we've presumed that they are real and they aren't. In other words, it's accurate that there isn't really a block. But as long as we believe these things, because belief is so powerful, as long as I believe that I'm not okay and that I'm left home, have left home, and that I'm isolated and so on and so forth, these unfortunate belief structures are the blocks. And if I don't look for them to find them so I can go, oh, this, if you can imagine a wall that's made out of a bunch of concrete blocks, and you go, and what you're looking for is on the other side of the wall of concrete blocks, I have to address the wall. I have to, like, okay, I'll take this out. I'll let this go. Okay, I take this one out. I'm changed my relationship with something here. So when I realized that the blocks aren't real, in other words, but so far as from our perspective that needs to be healed, they appear to be. So I have to treat them as if they were. And you might say, if I believe I'm no good and therefore can't ask for a raise at a job, and I can't have a decent relationship, and I walk around feeling like a victim all the time, that is a block that I have to go look at what I'm doing.
Yes.
I need to change my mind about this. So if you didn't look at the blocks, and I suppose there's some blocks that are sort of related to others, so that if you let go of this one, some of the ancillary ones go as well. But the big major blocks, you have to recognize are there before you can take step 2 to actively and specifically let them go. So I find in having worked with about a gazillion people that we have gravely misunderstood almost everything about ourselves. And it's that discovering something. It's like realizing we've engaged in flat earth thinking. In other words, we've just made some very basic presumptions that are totally false. And I can't know that. In other words, everybody in Portugal back in the 13th century was sure the earth was flat. It's like, look, you can see, here's the sky, here's the water ends, the earth is flat. What else is there to discuss about this? Until a few people go, well, I'm going to just check it out myself and see. And lo and behold, it turns out the earth is not flat. But you see, until those ideas are challenged, you're bound and imprisoned by them. So that's why it's key to look for it says you don't need to look for the good stuff, so to speak. That's already in place. You need to find out why you're not experiencing it. And it's always an internal process that's keeping us from experiencing our birthright.
True. He says about desire, going back to that, your misperception of thought regarding creative desire and holy desire.
And what was the last thing you just said?
Holy desire.
Okay.
He's trying to teach something here, that there's creative desire and then there's holy sacred desire. So I'm not sure what he means by that. I'm going to ask more. The misperception of desire stems from a sense of separation, and this is the lack that is the true nature of correction in creative desire. Holy desire can then allow the body to be utilized correctly. That is really interesting. I've never heard him say so before. How can it be utilized correctly? Because it becomes the nature of the great undoing.
For one thing, it sounds to me like, if I understand the person's question, is if you're living your life, which is a creative endeavor by definition, following your intuition rather than following this is what I'm just sure I need in order to be safe and okay and special and have everybody love me. In other words, I'm going to have a very different approach to everything that happens if I'm like, I'm going to just follow what happens and be open to it and trust that the presence of our lives knows what it's doing.
Yes.
It knows. And that's where creativity really has a chance to show up. How is creativity, the real creativity, going to show up if my mind is filled with plans and defenses and this is what I have to do in order to be okay? It's like all that stuff. That's why the removal of blocks is so important, because then your mind is open, and if you get an urge or an inclination just out of nowhere to do something or go someplace, you can trust that because you don't have it all conflated with, but I want my way. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, so it feels like that holy desire, as you're using the words, is like you're intuitive. It's like the trust your presence kind of flow of your life, which becomes a masterpiece when you do that.
He said, and then acknowledging the interpretations that your thoughts would lay upon your brother, which are insane and senseless. So creative desire can sometimes include this materialization of thought into a rather senseless creative form, which is the foundation of and a combination of fear of the past and planning for the future.
Absolutely, because one of the things that confuses people is that, and of course the course and many other things will say that your inner life and your outer world of form is a seamless whole. Well, sometimes I hear people get confused about that. That's like my thought causes my outside world. That's not the right arrangement. It's like my inner attitude and my world of form are a seamless whole. They are always the same thing. They are an inner and outer version of the focus of my attention. So I can call that my thoughts, so to speak, thoughts, beliefs, everything that I just kind of lump together as attitude. And it's like there is always going to be an exact equivalent because they are the same thing. It's not like they're two things and one is like the other. It's like they are two ways of experiencing the same thing. And if I'm in an inwardly fear-driven state, my so-called outer equivalent is going to be a mess. How could it not be?
He says there's a communication link between the two.
Yeah.
And you know this, he pointed to
I do.
that is Holy Spirit, the communication link.
Absolutely.
So he's giving a directive. He said, I have given you this, this directive. Choose to be aware by forgiving the creation that's being brought into every moment of your awareness. And by asking, Holy Spirit, what is in need of my blessing?
I didn't hear the last thing you said.
When you ask Holy Spirit, quote, what is in need of my blessing?
Ah, yes.
So a blessing is an activation of sorts.
Yeah.
And then you're coming out of creative desire and into holy sacred desire.
And what I find is, again, in the whole process of trust your presence, that whoever or whatever you happen to be engaging with at the moment is who or what needs your blessing, because that's why it's in your life, so to speak. So that it's not like I have to go, this needs to be blessed, this I don't have to bother with. In other words, it's kind of like the blessing and the incorporation of everything without discrimination, like I'll bless these and I'm not going to bless those. It's like that's what we're asked to stop doing, you know. And
selectivity is what he's saying.
Selectivity, yeah, and to have a uniform approach. And the reason for that is that doesn't mean like I am such a virtuous person that I'm doing this. It's because we feel happier, we feel better. One of the great commandments, so to speak, not only of the course, but of other things, is you will experience what you offer out to others. So if remember in the early part of the text, it says to have, give all to all, not just the ones you think deserve it, not just the ones that are the right color, not just the ones that, you know, fit your description of the good guys, whoever they are. It says to give all of your blessing, all of your attention, all of your goodwill to whatever is in this moment. Because remember, there isn't anything except the moment we're in. Everything else is relegated to thought, which you can think about, but you cannot experience. You can only experience right now. So that if my purpose is always going to be, well, whatever is included in right now, which could be other people, it can be, it doesn't matter, you know, all of the things that would make up any one moment. If my intention is anything that's in this moment gets my blessing. So I don't discriminate. Everybody gets treated the same way. Now, what that looks like might be different. In other words, how you treat the dog might not be the same way you treat the tree, but in terms of whatever form is, but in terms of attitude, it's like whoever's in my presence is part of me. It's a reflection of me, deserves only the highest and best I have to offer. End of story. Does that make sense?
It does. And then he brought me back to the list. He kind of turned my eyes downward into my list here. And he said, and then attack and rejection and abandonment, all of those beliefs are no longer relevant.
Well, yeah, because you can't want the best for somebody and want to attack them at the same time. In other words, you have to have relinquished one in favor of the other one, recognizing that great commandment, so to speak, that says, I will be the recipient of whatever I offer to someone else. Remember how it says the sword hangs over your own head and it will drop or be averted. depending upon how you decide what you think the other person deserves. The
Right.
way you treat them, the way you think about them is what you're going to get. It's how you send in your order to the universe, because the universe doesn't know about pronouns.
Oh,
It doesn't know you're offering up. It doesn't know you're requesting this amount of disaster for the next door neighbor because they aren't the way you think they should be. It's like you will receive it, period.
Yes, period. I completely agree. Another question that we have from a viewer has to do with healing. And there's a very interesting word. And I'd like to ask him and then discuss with you about this concept of healing based upon this person's question. She asked, Yeshua, how do I accept a fully healed image of myself, a perfect projection, by accepting that I am spirit? How do I bring it into this projection? And there are so many words in that that he wishes for your deeper observation. And he's pointing at the screen. So he pointed at the word self, my, and my, and it's all lower, myself. He said, can you accept by deciding? To accept involves decision, not that you are healed, but that you are whole, not that you are an image of yourself, but that you're an image of the Son. He said, so when you accept, it is a process of decision. And now he's giving a directive, he says. The directive is learn to decide with God without time, that your awareness is as easy as breath. And then your decision that you are whole is not to accept that you are spirit, but that you are the Son. The spirit is the communicator between the two. So you can't bring the word projection is not necessary, he says. You see what we're saying?
Yeah, I will experience lack of healing in the body to the extent that I'm hanging on to guilt in my own mind, because guilt is the great call for punishment.
Yes.
And it's going to show up in all sorts of ways, usually including the physical body. In other words, it's like, because if we could get that guilt is a prayer for punishment, it's like if you insist that you're guilty or somebody else is guilty, it's like getting down on your knees and praying for life not to work out. And you always get your prayer answered, because it's not like your computer where the little dialogue box comes up and it says, do you really want to delete this file? It doesn't come up and say, do you really want to order up this batch of distress for yourself? It just says, your wish is my command. And it whatever it is that it is our intention or focus or programming, however you want to talk about that, is always intimately, specifically, exactly, and immediately going to show up as our lives. So it's like healing requires that I let go of guilt. You know, it's got lessons. It says sickness is, anger taken out on the body, and that it's a defense against the truth. And so you go, defense against the truth. It's like, yes, identifying with a body and allowing it to sort of its sickness or its illness or whatever to drive our attention, so to speak, takes us away from the fact of our unity. And I've actually experimented some and have had some experiences with making myself sick as an experiment. I was in college, and I've also had experiences of when I dropped something that I was upset about, having an immediate healing. I mean, within seconds. So I'm very, very, very clear that the body is a diagnostic tool, so to speak, just like your whole world is a diagnostic tool that's going to show you generally what your attitude is by the way things flow or not, the way relationships work or not. All of that is very valuable information that's being given us. And what's going on with the body specifically. It's like it's a very amazing subset of the whole time and space world that's showing us what it is we're doing to ourselves, what we're holding on to, what we're believing, where we are still feeling guilty.
And the call for punishment.
And the call for punishment. And we're so creative that the ways we can figure out, we don't do it intellectually, but the way we set ourselves up for punishing is just amazing.
He says also, as an add-on to that, that guiltlessness is not difficult. Guiltlessness is effortless, as is breathing.
Yes.
So he's using breath as a directive again, as a tool, as the communication link, as your access to spirit, which is the communication link. And he said, and again, guiltlessness is as effortless as breathing. There is no effort, and you will be led gently through this.
Yeah. Absolutely. That it would be like guiltlessness is your natural state. I mean, it's the default wired in way we were created. So guiltlessness doesn't require anything at all. What I have to, where the effort is, if I want to talk about effort, is being diligent about finding those places where I'm still hanging on to guilt that I either recognize in myself and or am projecting onto somebody else, and seeing the wisdom of letting it go. When I can frame it in a way that makes sense to let it go, which is what I do all the time. In other words, so that people can see, oh yeah, I really can let this go. And they do. So you're right. It's like guiltlessness is like the default already there position. So what kind of effort could that take?
Right.
None.
Right. That's an interesting thing that humans do when they begin to disconnect spiritual truth and the God mind, the knowingness of the God mind, by trying to project with the mind-body concept. So this leads me to, I believe, what should probably be our final question, and then we'll wrap up with any comments from Carol. Another student of the course was asking a very big question that a lot of people are asking for Yeshua and for Carol. Why is there seemingly such a big disconnect between spiritual truth that I know from God mind and what I actually do and say? Why is there seemingly a disconnect? And then he asked, is that constant disparity and dissonance normal?
Unfortunately, in the world, the dissonance is because we can have all kinds of ideas and kind of intellectual beliefs and so on and so forth, but it's that programming. It's that what we really believe. When we really believe we are guilty and we are unlovable, it's like that's what's resulting in our daily moment by moment, not only everything in the physical world, but the nature of our interactions and everything else. So you might say you've got the head versus the gut, if you want to call it that. And when you've got a discrepancy between, yes, I believe this, I'm just sure this is true, and what's in your guts, the guts always win out. In other words, this is what's going to show up as your life. And the reason that it's helpful to know that is if you've got aspects of your life that are unsatisfactory, this doesn't mean you're wrong or bad. As I tell clients all the time, it's like, you don't have to be fixed or improved, but you believe something that does need to be fixed or improved or eliminated or upgraded or something. So it's not about you, it's about the beliefs. And if we can separate those two, that's where separation makes sense. To say, I am as beloved and joined, as united as, and nothing has gone wrong. I'm still infinite, eternal as I was created. But I've got these beliefs here that are the problem. And I need to see what they are. Relationships will help me see what they are. And gradually, because it's usually gradual, dismantle them.
Yes.
And so, yes, people will say, I believe this and I believe that, only the quality and nature of their life belies that. You can see that you can't say, yes, I absolutely believe I am a beloved, whole child of God, but I hate my wife and I don't have enough money. And, you know, the bugs eat my bushes. In other words, you can't have a life that is, you would consider highly unsatisfactory and say, and yet I believe all these things. That's the difference between the intellectual belief and what's really wired in. And the wired in part, of course, is way more potent than what the intellect has to say about this.
Yeah. He wanted to answer your question deeper for this student. And he said, the only relevant distance here is the loud sound that is ego mind that overshadows and overcompensates and covers the gentle, quiet whisper of the divine nature in God.
That's exactly right. That's what the programming does. In other words, it hides it. It makes it seem like it's not here. I couldn't agree more. That's exactly what happens. The ego mind is a bunch of beliefs and so on and so forth that we pay attention to. That doesn't make the truth of us go away, but it means we're not paying attention to it. I'm paying attention to this instead. So it seems to be absent. Seems is the operative word. It's not absent, but it's like, if it's here and I'm looking here, it seems like it's absent.
Right. You can't hear it. Yeah.
That's the only thing that's happening. So anything that helps us see we haven't altered ourselves, we haven't ruined ourselves, that's the deep, deep fear, that we've ruined ourselves, we've destroyed ourselves, we are the murderer of ourselves. And all of this is to go, no, my dear, you've just had this terrible, terrible nightmare. And you're so afraid you've done this. And not, as it says, like not one note in heaven's song is missed. Nothing has gone wrong. You're home, you're safe. And we're in the process of waking up from the nightmare.
He also said it's one of the greatest joys is to surrender fully into this allowance.
Yes.
That you don't need to know.
Absolutely.
And what you think you know, when you release it, there's so much grace, and grace is that technology that lights the way.
Yes.
Unfailingly.
Yes.
Unfailingly. So,
and you see, the ego mind wants to know because it's trying to plan and it's trying to stay safe. Like trying to know stuff and know the future and know what's happening on is so, if I know more stuff, maybe I can control better and I can therefore be safer. So you see, the fundamental premise of all of that planning and knowing and understanding and figuring out is I'm not safe. And I'm going to try to do all of this to be more safe. And the point is, you're already safe. You don't need to do all of that stuff. You need to trust your life in this moment, that it knows what you need, who you need to talk to, what needs to happen next, how your life is going to move forward, and to be able to kind of sit back and go, wow, the old analogies of like be in the back seat and not in the driver's seat, so to speak, and let your life unfold in a way that's just delightful. It doesn't require planning. Your planning may have to go out the window when a development comes along. So don't clutter. Now, that doesn't mean if you're going to go someplace in 3 weeks that you don't have to make a plane reservation. That's not planning. That I'm talking about the kind of planning like, oh dear, I've got to get my finances planned because how I want to make sure I have enough when I'm 97 years old. It's like, well, the best way to have enough when you're 97 years old is to heal your mind now. Now is the only moment that matters, so that you can rest assured that if healing your mind is your goal, you don't have to worry at all about your circumstances when you're 97 years old.
It's true.
In other words, you simply don't. You will be loved, you will be cared for. What do the details look like? Who knows? They don't matter. All you know is you will love them. You will be delighted with them. It's going to be perfect. You're going to feel free and open. And so let the universe figure out the details. I don't need to do that.
Yes.
Unless my intuition says, call this person and, I don't know, buy that house or something. In other words, your intuition is going to give you instructions all along the way, but it's not doing it in a let's plan for the future approach. It's like, do this today.
Mm-hmm.
Do this today. And then you can look back and go, wow, everything turned out wonderfully when I stopped trying to be in charge of all the details.
Absolutely. And that is the innocence that allows for grace to be apparent.
Yes, exactly. That's a perfect way to say it. Grace is always here, but who knows when your mind is cluttered with worry about what's happening and regret about what happened then and how come I'm not getting my way now. It's like you're sitting like in a great big garbage heap of unfortunate thinking, and you can't get your head up over the top of the pile to see what's really going on. But it's everything is operating in our best interest. To the extent that we feel guilty, we can't really imagine that life loves us, that is here for us, is carrying us forward, is doing everything possible to smooth our path, so to speak. We just can't, because we have not loved ourselves. We just can't imagine that we are, in fact, so loved. But learning that is what it's all about.
I completely agree. Such a blessing to be with you again.
Thank you. It's just more fun than anything.
My voice is starting to crack up in technology, yes, which sometimes happens when I channel him.
Besides, everybody will go brain dead if we continue on any longer. So, anyway, well, it's just been wonderful. And thank you to everybody. If I could say one thing to you, it's practice, don't try to learn. Practice is what's going to undo the defenses. Practice is what's going to allow your focus to be moved over in a direction that's more in alignment with the truth of you. Practice is going to allow you the grace to go, oh my God, this is the way it really is. In other words, not learning a bunch of stuff. The learning comes as a side effect of the practice. You're worth the practice.
Yes, you are.
Practice.
Absolutely. Can you tell our viewers more about where to find you? A lot of them are asking about some of your processes and some of your upcoming projects. I'd really love to hear about that.
I can. It's like, isn't this a big surprise? My website is carolhowe.com. And besides having lots and lots and lots of free resources, we have several online programs that people love. Our big signature series is called See How Life Works, which is an 8-part series, 16 hours of video. And it's not talking to camera like we're doing now. These are filmed, 3-camera shoot with like a properly done film. And it covers all of the major practices and principles of the course. We then have a master class that follows with that, where another group of people watch those, and then we got those together and filmed them with extra material and questions and answers and so on and so forth. And we have one that we filmed with Dr. Jerry Jampolsky, whom some of you may know from Love is Letting Go fame. He and his wife and I filmed something which is a lot of wonderful stories as well as teaching about the whole attitudinal healing movement. We're about to release a program called Transforming Emotions.
Tell us about that. I'm so excited about
that. That is the really, really important part. That's about, we can't get access to the frontal lobe of the brain to be able to start to make sense of in other words, we cannot become an adult until the frontal lobe is back on, because it goes offline when the stress response is on. So this is about regulating the emotions. I've talked to people literally all over the world, and everybody, course students, non-course students, young, old, educated, not educated. We've made our emotions the enemy. Like, it means I'm weak. It means I'm not okay. It means there's something the matter with me if I have an emotional response to something. And nothing could be further from the truth. Our emotions are messengers, and they're telling us what we believe that needs to be addressed and let go of. So we try to shoot the messenger.
We do.
Before the message is delivered.
Yes.
And so we keep in a closed loop cycle, because the stress response is on, drops chemicals into the body, creates our emotional state. I hate my emotional state, and anything I hate and resist, the brain goes, oh, another enemy, more chemicals. So now I'm in a closed loop. I can never get out of it.
I've seen this state, pardon the interruption, I've seen this state literally cause seizures and brain damage in people.
Yes, absolutely. So this is about, and I'm doing this with a woman named Dr. Becky Bailey, who's in my class in the See How Life Works series, because she's an early childhood development genius. And so we've got some things in there about, from her perspective, about how this starts as young as how we get into this fix in the first place, and how we can help regulate our own emotions and children's emotions, and the terrible costs we pay in terms of health, productivity, fractured relationships, and everything else when we don't know how to transform our emotions. And this process that I'm now calling the process to peace, I've got included in the workbook. It's like about step by step, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And if you do those steps in that order, you're going to be so much better off. All the people that I've used this with all get great results. So hopefully in the next few weeks, we're going to announce that one.
I can't wait. Will you let me know when you do?
I will. And we have a short little healing relationships one that a lot of people love. That's a short one. It's about an hour and 20 minutes long. That's got a great workbook that goes with it as well. So we've got, and then we have some other stuff planned after that, if we all keep putting one foot in front of the other. and we're very excited. We just love dreaming up new ways to try. There's only one thing to say, but we keep trying to come at it from as many different angles as possible to address the different ways people learn.
Now that's beautiful, holy desire right there. Taking all of that from God's word and putting that into your form and creating new ways for people to be safe in their creativity, be loved in their creativity, and to go back into this work, get out of guiltlessness, stay in innocence and grace. And I just really honor and respect what you and your team are doing. I can't wait to practice it.
I can't wait either. It's like it's taken us forever because we're redoing our website as well to kind of reflect.
Oh, that's such going through that as well.
Anyway, but it's more fun than anything in the world. I wouldn't do one single other thing than this.
So you'll announce that on carolhowe.com when it's ready.
We have a beautiful website now, but it's going to be replaced with kind of making this process to peace, which is the way to undo guilt, so to speak. In other words, it's basically taking what the course says and putting it into practical steps that I see work all the time. It would be criminal for me not to write this up and put it out there when I can say, when I deal with people, it works 100% of the time. Well, something that works 100% of the time cannot stay private.
Absolutely.
That's got to be out there. So anyway, it's been wonderful to see everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll talk again.
So blessed to have you again. Carol Howe at carolhowe.com. You can find her on YouTube. And it's the same thing, I believe, if they just search Carol Howe, they'll find
Yeah,
you. Correct?
exactly. There's tons of stuff. All the lessons are done with are
I
recorded
love
with
your lesson
commentaries. There's
because there's
huge amount of stuff there.
so much content for free there to help you go more deeply into these understandings. And they're so profoundly simple. And
Yes.
so clear. She's such a clear teacher of God. So thank you so much. We're going to end here.
Thank
I'll
you,
see you
dears.
next time. And we're going to go live off of YouTube now. See you later, YouTube.
Bye.
Bye.